The bar on the naval base was alive with the kind of energy only found after a long day of demanding work. Laughter bounced off the walls, glasses clinked, and the smell of polished wood mixed with the faint scent of coffee and alcohol. It was a place where sailors, officers, and other service members came to relax, share stories, and briefly escape the strict discipline of their duties. The crowd was diverse. Some young, fresh-faced recruits nervously sipping beers, others older, seasoned veterans leaning back in chairs, swapping tales of past missions and distant seas. Among them, a woman sat alone at the corner of the bar, quietly observing the scene around her. She wasn't flashy or loud. Her presence was calm, almost unnoticed at first glance. But there was something in her eyes, a quiet intensity, that hinted she had lived through experiences far beyond the average service member. She lifted her glass, taking a slow sip of her drink while scanning the room with practiced awareness. Her posture was relaxed, yet every subtle movement betrayed discipline. The way she straightened in her seat when someone walked by, the slight adjustment of her uniform, the careful but confident way she rested her hand on the bar. People might have assumed she was just another officer winding down after a long day. Few, if any, guessed the weight of her accomplishments or the authority she carried simply by being who she was. Across the room, a group of officers had gathered near the counter, their laughter booming. Among them was a SEAL Admiral, a man whose presence was commanding even without speaking. His uniform was immaculate, decorated with ribbons, badges, and medals that told stories of countless missions, victories, and sacrifices. He was known for his sharp mind, his strategic brilliance, and a no-nonsense attitude that earned him both respect and fear among peers and subordinates alike. On this particular evening, the Admiral was in a rare mood for humor, enjoying the light-hearted chatter around him while letting the tension of command melt away for a few hours. As his gaze swept across the bar, it landed on the woman sitting quietly by herself. He noticed her immediately, not because she was conspicuous, but because something about her stood out. Perhaps it was the calm confidence she exuded, or the way her eyes seemed to measure the room with quiet precision. With a smirk, he decided to approach her. He was curious, entertained, and maybe a little mischievous. Pulling up a stool beside her, he leaned in with that teasing air of someone used to commanding rooms and situations alike. "So," he began, his tone light, carrying just a hint of challenge. "What's your rank?" It was meant as a casual joke. The Admiral didn't expect a serious answer. He anticipated a laugh, a shrug, or maybe a playful retort. The atmosphere in the bar seemed perfect for such banter. A little fun among colleagues who understood each other's worlds, a momentary break from the relentless demands of naval life. But the woman didn't flinch, didn't laugh nervously, didn't fumble for words. Instead, she looked up at him with an expression that was calm, measured, and confident. There was no hesitation, no trace of intimidation, despite the Admiral's reputation and the sheer force of his presence. Her gaze met his squarely, and she smiled faintly. Not a polite or nervous smile, but one of quiet assurance, of someone who knew exactly who they were and what they represented. The entire tone of the interaction shifted in that instant. A simple question, meant as a casual joke, became a moment charged with expectation. Everyone near them noticed it, the way the laughter around them seemed to dim slightly, the subtle turning of heads as if the bar itself was sensing that something significant was about to happen. The woman's composure was striking. She didn't need to raise her voice or make a grand gesture. Her mere presence, the calm authority in the way she sat, carried a weight far greater than anyone could have predicted. The Admiral, used to commanding rooms, strategizing missions, and leading some of the most elite forces in the world, found himself facing someone whose quiet confidence matched, if not surpassed, his own. There was a fleeting moment of tension, not uncomfortable, but electric. The kind of tension that makes people lean in, curious about what happens next, unsure of what they are about to witness. Around them, the bar's usual chatter continued, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation. Fellow officers exchanged glances, sensing something remarkable was unfolding, though they couldn't quite put their finger on it. The woman raised her glass once more, tilting it slightly, and prepared to answer. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The admiral, who had spent decades making split-second decisions in high-stakes situations, felt the unusual, almost unfamiliar weight of uncertainty. He had expected an easy, playful answer. What he didn't expect was the authority and command that would soon emerge from a single, simple response. And so the stage was set. A quiet bar, a room full of unsuspecting service members, a seasoned SEAL Admiral with a teasing question, and a woman whose calm composure would soon turn the entire encounter on its head. Every eye in the bar was unknowingly drawn into the moment, unknowingly witnessing the beginning of a story that would ripple across the base long after the night ended. The tension, the anticipation, and the unspoken respect were all in place. All that remained was her answer, and that answer would change everything. The woman paused for a brief moment, her calm gaze never leaving the admiral's. The room around them seemed to blur as attention subtly shifted, drawn by an almost invisible magnetic pull. People didn't realize it yet, but something extraordinary was about to happen. The admiral leaned in slightly, his smirk still lingering, expecting the playful or nervous answer that most young officers or sailors would give in such a situation. He thought he had the upper hand, the joke already set, ready to be enjoyed at someone else's expense. But she had a different plan, though she wasn't scheming or being clever in a conventional way. Her plan was simple: honesty, confidence, and letting her accomplishments speak for themselves. She took a steady breath, as if preparing for a routine action that she had performed countless times before in far more critical situations. But unlike a mission, this was a social encounter, a moment that carried no immediate danger. Yet the tension was palpable. The admiral, a man accustomed to reading every nuance of human behavior, was intrigued. He noticed the precision in her posture, the controlled way she held her hand on the glass, and the unwavering focus in her eyes. This wasn't just someone answering a question. It was someone asserting her presence, her authority, without a single trace of arrogance. Finally, her voice cut through the bar's background noise, calm and firm. "Fleet Commander," she said. The words were simple, but they hit the admiral like a wave he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the title itself that caused the pause. It was the certainty, the authority, and the sheer confidence behind it. In a split second, he realized this wasn't a joke, a casual exaggeration, or an attempt to impress. This was the truth. The woman before him carried a rank that demanded respect, not just for the title, but for the journey, the challenges, and the leadership it represented. The atmosphere in the bar changed instantly. Conversations slowed, glasses paused mid-air, and heads turned subtly toward the two of them. Some people leaned in, curious about the reaction of the SEAL Admiral, whose reputation for calm authority was legendary. Others, who didn't fully understand military hierarchy, felt the sudden shift in energy and knew intuitively that something significant had happened. The Admiral's expression, which had started as amusement, transformed into disbelief. He blinked once, then twice, as if trying to reconcile what he had just heard with the image he had of the woman in front of him. His smirk faded, replaced by a rare moment of genuine astonishment. The woman, meanwhile, remained composed. There was no trace of a smile, no hint of self-satisfaction. She simply met his gaze steadily, letting the weight of her words settle naturally. In the military, especially at her level, actions often spoke louder than words. But tonight, her words carried the same weight. Fleet Commander wasn't just a label. It represented years of training, missions, leadership under pressure, and countless difficult decisions. She had earned it in ways most could only imagine. And now, in this casual setting, it created a ripple that no one could ignore. The Admiral's mind raced. He had faced complex, high-stakes operations, negotiated life-or-death decisions, and led elite forces in some of the world's most challenging environments. Yet, this single interaction left him momentarily off balance. He had expected a light-hearted exchange, something easy and predictable. Instead, he was confronted with authority that demanded immediate respect, leaving him almost speechless. He realized, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that rank and accomplishment couldn't always be gauged by appearance, age, or even personality. Sometimes, true command simply revealed itself, effortlessly, in the most unexpected moments. Around them, the bar's patrons began to notice. Junior officers whispered to each other, trying to make sense of what they had just heard. Some senior members exchanged knowing glances, recognizing the rarity of such a presence in a casual environment. The woman's calm confidence had created an aura that could not be ignored. Her answer had subtly reminded everyone that leadership was not about who spoke the loudest or carried the most medals. It was about the quiet, unwavering authority of someone who had truly earned it. Even the Admiral, despite his decades of experience and countless high-pressure encounters, found himself reassessing the situation. He adjusted his posture slightly, straightening in a rare display of attentiveness. The smirk was gone, replaced by a mixture of respect, curiosity, and reflection. He wasn't just listening to the words, he was absorbing the meaning behind them, realizing the significance of the woman's rank and what it represented in the broader context of naval leadership. The woman, sensing no need to add more, simply nodded slightly, letting the weight of her words linger. She didn't need to explain herself or justify her accomplishments. The simple statement, "Fleet Commander," was enough. It carried decades of training, countless missions, and unspoken sacrifices that had shaped her into the leader she was today. The room felt it, even if not everyone could articulate why. And in that moment, the joke that the Admiral had intended evaporated completely. What began as playful teasing turned into a profound moment of respect. The bar, once filled with casual chatter and laughter, now felt the quiet, compelling presence of someone whose authority and leadership could not be challenged or diminished. Every eye in the room, even those not fully understanding military hierarchy, sensed the shift. The woman had claimed the space, not with force, but with the quiet power of truth, confidence, and earned respect. The moment her words echoed across the bar, a sudden stillness seemed to fall over the room. It was subtle at first. People mid-conversation paused, their eyes flicking toward the corner where the woman sat. Then, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere shifted. The easy laughter and casual chatter faded into quiet murmurs. Everyone, whether consciously or not, was sensing that something extraordinary had just happened. And at the center of it all was the SEAL Admiral, a man who had faced life-or-death decisions on countless missions, now frozen in a rare, almost human moment of astonishment. The Admiral's initial reaction was disbelief. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to make sense of what he had just heard. His mind, trained over decades to calculate risks, anticipate enemy movements, and respond instantly under pressure, was struggling to process something far simpler yet far more profound. The authority and confidence radiating from the woman before him. She had given a one-word answer, "Fleet Commander," but it carried the weight of years of discipline, sacrifice, and leadership. He had expected a joke, maybe a nervous laugh, perhaps even a playful retort. What he got instead was undeniable proof of competence, experience, and command. His body language betrayed him. Where once there was a relaxed smirk, now there was a stiffening of posture, a tightening of jaw, a widening of eyes. The Admiral had led some of the most elite forces in the world, had faced enemies who planned and executed operations with lethal precision, and yet here, in a simple naval bar, he felt the surprising weight of respect he had rarely experienced firsthand. There was a fleeting moment where he almost wished he could rewind, to retreat into his comfortable role of commanding authority without interruption. But it was too late. She had spoken, and her words had already rewritten the dynamics of the room. The surrounding officers noticed the shift immediately. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, heads turned subtly, and whispers filled the air. Some of the younger sailors stared wide-eyed, trying to process the impact of what had happened. For them, it wasn't just that a fleet commander had appeared in a casual setting, it was the way she carried herself. There was no arrogance, no need to assert dominance with loud words or gestures. Her authority was quiet, effortless, and unmistakable. People began to understand that leadership was not always about who spoke the loudest or who commanded the largest team. Sometimes it was about presence, confidence, and the simple acknowledgement of earned respect. The admiral, meanwhile, remained silent. The pause stretched longer than any joke could justify. He tried to formulate a response, something witty or lighthearted, but the words would not come. Every instinct to speak, to assert his usual dominance in conversation, was replaced by a rare humility. He had encountered brave officers, strategic geniuses, and fearless commanders, but this was different. He was facing someone whose rank was matched perfectly by presence, intellect, and calm authority. For the first time in years, he felt the subtle but undeniable weight of being in the presence of someone equally, or perhaps more, commanding than himself. Around the bar, the quiet murmurs grew. Some officers whispered to each other, sharing brief explanations of what fleet commander meant, and the significance of holding such a rank. Others just watched in awe, unsure of the hierarchy but sensing that something remarkable had just occurred. The woman, seated calmly with her glass in hand, seemed almost oblivious to the ripple effect she had created. Her focus was steady, her demeanor unshakable. There was no need for her to prove anything further. The simple statement of her rank had spoken volumes, conveying not just authority but experience, intelligence, and the weight of responsibility she carried every day. The admiral finally exhaled, almost imperceptibly, and leaned back slightly, still studying her. The realization had settled in. This was no ordinary encounter. He was no longer in a casual, light-hearted moment. He was witnessing the embodiment of leadership in its purest form. Someone who had earned every inch of respect simply by being who she was. And in that instant, he understood a truth that he rarely needed to consider. Authority could not be faked, charisma could not substitute for experience, and true leadership demanded acknowledgement, even from the most seasoned of peers. The tension in the bar lingered, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a mixture of awe, curiosity, and subtle admiration. People instinctively gave her space, their movements more careful, their voices quieter. Even those who had never met her, who did not fully understand the meaning of her rank, felt the magnetic pull of her presence. She had entered the room quietly, but her impact was undeniable. The simple words, "Fleet Commander," had become a quiet command, a statement that transcended humor, ego, or expectation. For the admiral, the silence was a lesson in humility. He had spent his career mastering strategy, anticipating threats, and commanding forces in extreme circumstances. Yet here he was, a man trained to lead without hesitation, caught off guard by the effortless authority of a single individual. He realized that while experience, medals, and reputation mattered, nothing could replace the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who had truly earned their place. The woman finally allowed herself a faint smile, not one of arrogance, but of calm acknowledgement. She had spoken, and the room had responded. The admiral, still absorbing the moment, offered a subtle nod, a silent gesture of respect. That one word had done more than answer a question. It had transformed the dynamic of the entire space, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The bar slowly returned to life, laughter and chatter resuming, but the energy had shifted. No one would forget that moment. Not the admiral, not the officers around him, and certainly not anyone who had sensed the quiet authority radiating from a fleet commander who could command respect without raising her voice. As the initial tension in the bar began to settle, the story of the woman's life started to reveal itself. Not through words, but through the aura she carried, the quiet authority in her posture, and the subtle confidence that had silenced a seasoned SEAL Admiral. What many of the onlookers didn't realize was that her calm exterior and commanding presence were the result of decades of discipline, sacrifice, and relentless hard work. She had not stumbled into this rank by chance. It was a path forged through determination, resilience, and an unyielding commitment to her country. She had grown up in a small town, where life was simple but demanding. Her family wasn't wealthy, and opportunities were limited. From a young age, she learned the importance of hard work, self-reliance, and persistence. She spent hours running, swimming, and training herself physically, knowing that strength alone would not make her stand out. It was her dedication and mental toughness that would ultimately define her. While other children played carefree games, she studied maps, read about naval history, and imagined herself leading missions across the seas. Her dreams were big, and she pursued them with a seriousness that surprised even the adults around her. At the age when most teenagers were discovering casual hobbies, she had already set her sights on the Navy. She joined the Naval Academy, enduring grueling physical training, early mornings, and constant tests of mental endurance. Each day was a challenge. Time drills, navigation exercises, and simulated combat scenarios tested her limits repeatedly. While some of her peers complained, she thrived under pressure. Challenges that seemed impossible to others became milestones for her, building resilience and confidence with every obstacle overcome. Her instructors quickly noticed her leadership potential. She wasn't the loudest in the room, nor did she boast about her abilities, but her actions spoke volumes. She led by example, quietly inspiring those around her to rise to their best. After graduating from the academy, her journey became even more demanding. She was assigned to specialized units that required both physical excellence and strategic thinking. Missions were complex, dangerous, and required absolute precision. Many of these assignments were classified, and only a few ever knew the details of what she accomplished. Day after day, she demonstrated courage, intelligence, and quick decision-making under pressure. Fellow officers learned to rely on her instincts, while superiors recognized her ability to handle responsibility far beyond her years. Every successful mission added a layer to her reputation, not one built on ego, but on respect earned through competence. Her career was also shaped by sacrifices that few could imagine. Long deployments meant missing family gatherings, birthdays, and holidays. Friendships were tested as colleagues moved on or retired, leaving her to adapt to constantly changing teams. But through it all, she maintained her focus, understanding that leadership required not just skill, but consistency, integrity, and the ability to endure hardship without complaint. Her character was forged in these moments, each challenge making her stronger and more prepared for the day she would command fleets. Promotion to fleet commander was not sudden. It was a result of years of relentless dedication. She had navigated every obstacle, mastered every assignment, and earned the trust of her superiors and peers alike. Fleet commander was more than a title. It was a symbol of responsibility over entire naval operations, a role that required strategic vision, emotional intelligence, and the ability to lead hundreds, sometimes thousands of service members. It was a rank that few attained, and even fewer held with the quiet confidence she displayed. The authority came not from the uniform or the insignia, but from the mastery of her craft, the respect she had earned, and the integrity with which she led every mission. In that bar, the weight of her experiences was invisible to most, yet somehow it radiated from her. Her calm eyes hinted at years spent analyzing complex scenarios, leading teams through adversity, and making decisions that could determine life or death. Her posture, poised yet relaxed, reflected countless hours of discipline. Even her silence spoke volumes. It was a reflection of someone who knew when to act, when to speak, and when to command presence without uttering a single word. The story of her past, though unspoken, was etched into every line of her face, every movement, and every glance. The Admiral, still absorbing the moment, was beginning to piece together the depth behind her simple answer. He realized that her rank was not just a title. It was a testament to the life she had led, the challenges she had overcome, and the excellence she had consistently demonstrated. She was the embodiment of leadership earned through action, courage, and resilience, not through luck or convenience. The humor of his initial joke had vanished, replaced by a profound respect for someone who had walked a path few could even imagine. Around the bar, the subtle energy shift continued. Officers and sailors could feel it even if they didn't know her full history. There was something magnetic about her presence, an aura that demanded respect without the need for words or force. The story of her past may have been hidden in plain sight, but its impact was immediate. Through decades of struggle, dedication, and quiet achievement, she had reached a position that even the most seasoned leaders acknowledged with reverence. And so, in that unassuming bar, surrounded by colleagues and admirers, her life story, though largely untold, was written all over her being. Each experience, each mission, each sacrifice had led to this moment. A simple answer to a casual question carried the weight of years, of triumphs and hardships, and left everyone who witnessed it with a lasting impression of what true leadership and dedication looked like. The room remained quiet, a silence that carried more weight than words ever could. The Admiral, who had spent decades leading some of the most elite forces in the world, was still frozen in disbelief. He could feel the energy shift around him as the gravity of her words settled. Not just for him, but for everyone present in the bar. It was rare, almost unheard of, to see someone command such immediate respect with nothing more than a calm, confident statement. And yet, here she was, a woman who had achieved what most could only dream of, holding the title of Fleet Commander, and doing so with a natural authority that needed no explanation. The Admiral's mind raced. He reflected on the meaning of the title, on the lives and operations that the rank represented. A fleet commander wasn't just an officer. She was a leader of leaders, someone responsible for countless service members, naval operations, and strategic decisions that could impact entire missions and national security. The weight of that responsibility was unimaginable to anyone who hadn't lived it, yet she carried it effortlessly. The more he observed her, the more he realized that the title didn't come from the uniform or the medals. It came from years of dedication, discipline, and sacrifices that were rarely seen or recognized by those outside her immediate circle. Around the bar, subtle murmurs began to spread. Fellow officers exchanged glances, whispering explanations of what Fleet Commander meant, and trying to comprehend the significance of her rank. Younger officers, who had never seen someone of her stature in a casual setting, were struck with awe. They noticed the Admiral's reaction, his silence louder than any words he could have spoken. The admiration in the room grew, not because of her fame or recognition, but because of the quiet, undeniable presence she projected. It was the kind of respect that didn't need to be demanded. It simply existed, a natural response to competence and authority earned over a lifetime. The Admiral took a subtle breath, his mind reflecting on his own experiences. He had led missions that tested courage, strategy, and endurance in extreme situations. He had faced enemies who planned with precision and ruthlessness, and yet here, in a simple naval bar, he was confronted with a different kind of challenge, the presence of someone whose authority and command were absolute, without even needing to act. It was a humbling moment, a reminder that leadership was not about ego, rank, or personal accolades. It was about the ability to inspire, to make decisive choices, and to carry responsibility with quiet confidence. He observed her more closely. Her posture was relaxed but disciplined, her eyes calm yet alert, and every movement measured and deliberate. There was no need for her to speak further, no need for grand gestures or displays of authority. The mere fact of her being, of her holding the rank she had earned, was enough. It was a lesson in restraint and power, a reminder that true leadership didn't require noise or showmanship. Her presence commanded the room, and everyone could feel it, even if they couldn't articulate exactly why. The ripple effect of that realization spread quickly. Some officers approached her quietly, offering polite nods of respect, while others simply observed from a distance, sensing that this encounter was something rare, almost legendary. Even those who didn't fully understand the military hierarchy could feel the change in the energy of the room. There was a magnetic quality to her authority, an invisible pull that drew attention, admiration, and respect without a single demand or assertion. The Admiral's internal dialogue continued. He thought about the countless young officers he had trained, the missions he had overseen, and the decisions he had made under intense pressure. He had always valued discipline, courage, and tactical intelligence, but he now recognized something equally important: quiet confidence, earned through experience and dedication, could command attention and respect in ways that even a decorated uniform could not. This realization, though subtle, left a lasting impression on him. He understood that leadership wasn't just about what one accomplished in the field. It was also about how one carried oneself in every moment, in every interaction, regardless of circumstance. Meanwhile, the woman remained poised, her composure unwavering. She was aware of the attention she had drawn, but she did not seek it. There was no prideful display, no need to assert dominance. She simply existed in the moment, allowing the weight of her rank and experience to speak for itself. The silent acknowledgement from the admiral, the respectful nods from officers around her, and the quiet awe of younger sailors all reinforced a truth she had long understood. True leadership was recognized naturally, without words or demands. The admiral finally raised his hand subtly in a gesture of acknowledgement. It was not boastful, nor was it loud. It was a silent, respectful recognition of someone who had achieved greatness, someone whose experience and presence were undeniable. That small action spoke volumes, marking a shift in the way everyone in the bar perceived not just her, but the nature of leadership itself. The evening continued, the chatter returning slowly to the room, but the energy remained changed. The woman's answer, her calm authority, and the admiral's stunned respect had created a moment that would linger in memory. Stories of her presence and the impact of that brief exchange would quietly circulate among the officers and sailors for days, serving as a lesson in humility, recognition, and the quiet, undeniable power of true leadership. In that simple moment, in a bar filled with laughter and conversation, the woman had left an indelible mark. The admiral had learned a subtle yet profound lesson, that leadership is more than experience, medals, or rank. It is the presence, calm confidence, and quiet authority that inspire respect naturally. And for everyone in the room, it was clear. Some people do not need to shout or demand attention to lead. They simply do, effortlessly and powerfully, leaving a lasting impression on all who witness it. The ripple effect of that one simple word, Fleet Commander, began to spread across the room like a wave. The bar, which had once been filled with casual chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses, now hummed with a different energy. Conversations slowed, not out of discomfort, but out of respect. Officers, sailors, and even civilians in uniform began to realize that they were witnessing something rare, an encounter that would be remembered and retold. It wasn't just about her rank. It was about the quiet authority, confidence, and experience that she carried effortlessly. The way she sat, the way she held her glass, the calm in her eyes. It all combined to create an aura that demanded attention and admiration without a single boast or gesture of dominance. Young officers leaned slightly closer, whispering to each other, trying to comprehend the significance of the moment. "She's a fleet commander," someone murmured, almost to themselves, as if repeating the title would make it feel real. Another officer nodded slowly, understanding that this wasn't just a rank. It was a symbol of countless missions, immense responsibility, and years of hard work. Even those who didn't fully grasp military hierarchy could sense the difference between ordinary authority and the kind of command that comes only from experience, resilience, and earned respect. The admiral, still seated across from her, could feel the shift in the room. He had expected to joke, to make a light-hearted remark, perhaps even to see a momentary awkwardness. But instead, he found himself surrounded by silent acknowledgement of her presence. The room, full of experienced officers who had faced countless challenges, seemed to collectively pause in recognition of the authority she carried. His initial amusement had been replaced by reflection and respect. He realized, perhaps for the first time in this kind of setting, that leadership wasn't about who spoke the loudest or carried the most medals. It was about presence, poise, and the quiet confidence that inspires others naturally. Meanwhile, she remained perfectly composed. There was no rush to explain herself, no attempt to impress anyone further. She didn't need to. Her words, her rank, and the presence she exuded had already conveyed everything necessary. Every subtle movement, the way she shifted in her seat, the calm placement of her hands, the unflinching focus of her gaze, spoke volumes. It was clear to everyone that she had faced challenges far greater than a casual bar conversation. Her life, her career, and the experiences that led her to this moment had prepared her to command respect simply by being herself. Whispers began to circulate among the other officers. Stories of fleet commanders, their responsibilities, and the kind of decisions they had to make filled the air, as those less familiar with her rank tried to grasp its importance. Some of the older, more experienced officers exchanged subtle nods of approval. They recognized the magnitude of what had just occurred. A woman had walked into the room quietly, responded calmly, and instantly altered the energy of the bar. She had reminded everyone present of what real leadership looked like. Authority earned, presence commanded, and respect given willingly, not demanded. The Admiral's respect grew steadily. He leaned back slightly, studying her, mentally recalling every mission, every operation, every decision he had ever led. He understood now that this was more than a social interaction. It was a lesson in leadership, humility, and the power of quiet authority. Her presence reminded him, and everyone in the room, that true leadership cannot be faked. Titles, medals, and decorations might signal rank, but they cannot replace the confidence, experience, and poise that come from years of dedication, discipline, and sacrifice. The energy in the room was not tense, but it was palpable. It was the kind of energy that makes people listen more carefully, observe more closely, and reconsider their assumptions. Officers and sailors began to unconsciously mirror her composure. Conversations resumed, but they were more measured, thoughtful, and respectful. It was as if her quiet authority had subtly redefined the behavior of everyone present. Without a single command, she had led not through words, but through presence and poise. Even those who were new to the military environment sensed the weight of her position. They might not have understood every detail about what a fleet commander does, but they understood leadership in the human sense. They understood respect earned, confidence expressed without arrogance, and authority felt rather than demanded. She had become a living example of the principle that actions, presence, and character often speak louder than words or appearances. The ripple continued. Officers who had been standing at the bar, casually chatting, now approached her quietly to nod, shake hands, or offer small gestures of recognition. Some of the junior sailors looked on with a mixture of awe and inspiration, realizing that leadership could manifest in many ways, and sometimes it came in the form of someone calm, composed, and confident, rather than loud or commanding. Even the Admiral, with decades of experience, felt a sense of humility and admiration, acknowledging silently that he was witnessing something extraordinary. The woman's calm smile never faded. She seemed almost unaware of the effect she had caused, yet she didn't need to be aware. Her entire life had trained her for moments like this, not moments of showy recognition, but moments that subtly altered perceptions, inspired respect, and reminded people of what true leadership looked like. She had stepped into a casual bar, answered a simple question, and in doing so had left an impression that would last far beyond that night. By the time the bar began to settle into its normal rhythm, it was clear that the energy had changed. Stories of this encounter would quietly circulate among the officers and sailors, each retelling adding layers of admiration and awe. The ripple effect of her presence was already spreading, inspiring not only those in the room that night but also those who would hear about it later. Leadership had been demonstrated in the purest form, not through words, but through poise, confidence, and earned respect. The Admiral, still seated across from her, finally allowed himself to reflect on what had just happened. For decades, he had been a man of action, a leader who made split-second decisions that could determine life or death. He had been trained to assess situations quickly, to read people instantly, and to command respect wherever he went. Yet, in that moment he found himself humbled. The calm authority, quiet confidence, and effortless presence of the fleet commander had left him momentarily speechless, forcing him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about leadership. It was a rare, almost shocking experience for someone so accustomed to being in command. He watched her closely, noticing every small detail, the way her eyes remained steady, the slight nod she gave when acknowledging his gaze, the subtle way she held herself in the chair, relaxed but disciplined. Every motion was intentional, yet natural, conveying confidence without arrogance. He realized that this was what true leadership looked like. Not a performance or a show of medals, but a presence so strong that it commanded respect automatically. He reflected on all the people he had met throughout his career, the young officers he had mentored, and the senior leaders he had worked alongside. Very few had ever projected authority in such a quiet, effortless way. The admiral's thoughts turned inward. He considered the countless operations he had led, the missions that required precision, courage, and unwavering focus. He realized that while he had always valued skill, strategy, and courage, he had perhaps underestimated the power of presence, the ability to inspire respect and trust simply by existing with calm assurance. The fleet commander before him embodied this power perfectly. She had achieved more than most, yet she made it look effortless, as though confidence and authority were natural parts of her being rather than titles she had earned. Around them, the subtle energy in the room had not dissipated. Fellow officers and sailors continued to sense the significance of the moment. Some whispered quietly to one another, discussing her rank, her achievements, and the commanding presence that had shifted the atmosphere of the bar in an instant. Junior officers, in particular, were wide-eyed, absorbing a lesson in leadership they would not forget. They saw firsthand that leadership was not about ego, loud words, or ostentatious displays. It was about integrity, confidence, and the quiet ability to inspire respect through action and demeanor. The admiral's reflection deepened. He realized that the way he had initially approached her, light-hearted, teasing, expecting a laugh or a nervous response, had been based on assumptions. He had assumed she would be just another officer in the bar, unaware that she commanded fleets and had earned the respect of her peers through years of service, sacrifice, and disciplined leadership. This assumption, he noted with humility, was exactly the mistake many made, judging others by appearances rather than recognizing the substance beneath. The moment was a lesson in humility, and the admiral silently acknowledged it. The fleet commander, meanwhile, remained composed, seemingly unaware of the storm of admiration and reflection she had created. She didn't need to assert her authority further. The title she held, the experiences she had endured, and the quiet confidence she projected were enough. Those in the bar could feel it, even if they did not fully understand the weight of her achievements. Her presence had created a ripple effect, a subtle yet powerful influence on everyone around her, including the most experienced and decorated officer in the room. Some officers, noticing the admiral's reaction, began to grasp the magnitude of her authority. They approached with careful respect, offering small gestures of acknowledgement, like a polite nod or a brief handshake. Others, especially the younger sailors, simply observed, absorbing a lesson they had never been taught in manuals or lectures. The room was witnessing leadership in its purest form, earned, lived, and felt rather than shouted or demanded. The admiral, taking a slow, deliberate breath, finally raised his hand in a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. It wasn't a dramatic display, but it spoke volumes. This simple motion conveyed respect, recognition, and an unspoken understanding that she had achieved greatness and carried herself with a dignity that commanded admiration. The gesture also reflected the admiral's humility, a rare and quiet acknowledgement that even the most experienced leaders could learn from the presence of someone else. At that moment, the bar seemed to hold its collective breath. The significance of what had transpired was tangible. The fleet commander had not just answered a question. She had shifted the dynamics of the room, inspiring respect, reflection, and admiration. The impact of her presence and authority extended beyond the casual interaction, leaving everyone with a sense of having witnessed something extraordinary. As the evening continued, the bar slowly resumed its normal rhythm, but the energy had irrevocably changed. Officers and sailors continued their conversations, but with a newfound awareness of leadership, respect, and the quiet power of experience. The admiral, now fully conscious of the lesson he had learned, remained reflective. He understood that true leadership is not measured by medals, accolades, or appearances. It is measured by the confidence, integrity, and calm authority that inspire others naturally and effortlessly. By the time the night wore on, it was clear that this encounter would linger in memory for everyone present. The lesson was simple yet profound. True leadership cannot be faked, and respect cannot be demanded. It is earned through action, experience, and the quiet assurance that comes from a life dedicated to discipline, service, and excellence. The fleet commander had demonstrated all of this in a single, calm exchange, leaving a lasting impression that would resonate long after the bar returned to its casual evening atmosphere. As the evening wore on, the woman finally stood to leave the bar. She moved with the same calm confidence she had displayed all night, every step measured and purposeful. There was no rush in her movements, no trace of arrogance. Only the quiet assurance of someone who knew her worth and carried the weight of her responsibilities with ease. Around her, the atmosphere that had shifted moments earlier still lingered. The chatter had resumed, but it carried a new tone. Respect, curiosity, and admiration. People were quietly reflecting on what had just transpired, realizing that they had witnessed a rare and extraordinary moment of leadership in its purest form. The SEAL Admiral, still seated, watched her carefully. He understood now that this encounter would remain with him far longer than any casual conversation or social interaction. He had expected a joke, a playful moment to pass time, and instead he had experienced a profound lesson in leadership, humility, and respect. The woman's presence, calm and commanding, had left an indelible mark not only on him but on everyone else in the room. The lesson was clear. True authority and leadership are not declared. They are felt, observed, and earned through years of experience and dedication. The room slowly returned to normal activity, yet a subtle energy lingered. Officers who had initially been engrossed in casual conversations now carried themselves a little differently, influenced by what they had witnessed. Junior sailors quietly discussed the encounter, admiring how a single person could command so much respect without raising their voice. More experienced officers reflected on the power of presence, understanding that the quiet confidence displayed by the fleet commander was as vital a leadership skill as tactical intelligence or strategic planning. This subtle ripple of inspiration spread silently through the bar, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The woman paused briefly by the door, acknowledging a few officers with a nod. She didn't speak unnecessarily, nor did she seek recognition. Her acknowledgement was quiet but meaningful, a reflection of the humility and grace she carried alongside her rank and accomplishments. The people she passed instinctively straightened, offering subtle gestures of respect. Even those who were unfamiliar with the full extent of her achievements felt the power of her presence. Leadership, they realized, was not about ego or theatrics. It was about quiet authority, confidence, and the ability to inspire without words. As she stepped outside, the cool night air greeted her. The day had been long, filled with responsibilities, decisions, and challenges that she faced routinely as a fleet commander. Yet tonight's encounter, casual and unplanned, had reminded her of another kind of responsibility, the responsibility to inspire, to lead by example, and to quietly shape perceptions. Without even intending to, she had left a lasting impact on everyone she interacted with that evening. Her influence had extended far beyond the walls of the bar, as officers and sailors alike would carry the memory of this encounter with them. The Admiral, still seated, reflected deeply on what had transpired. He thought about the assumptions he had made at the start of the conversation and realized the importance of humility. Leadership could never be assumed or judged superficially. It was earned, and it was expressed through years of dedication, sacrifice, and calm confidence. In that brief moment, he had been reminded that true leaders inspire respect naturally. Titles, uniforms, and medals may signify achievement, but they cannot replace the genuine authority that comes from experience, character, and presence. Back in the bar, officers slowly returned to their conversations, but the atmosphere was subtly changed. Stories of the fleet commander's presence and the admiral's silent reaction would quietly circulate throughout the base. People would retell the story to one another, each retelling reinforcing the lesson. True leadership cannot be faked, respect cannot be demanded, and the quiet, confident authority of someone who has earned their place speaks louder than words ever could. The encounter had become a living example of these principles, a moment that would inspire others for years to come. For the young officers, the lesson was immediate and tangible. They had seen firsthand that leadership is not about being loud or seeking attention. It is about integrity, discipline, experience, and the ability to carry responsibility with grace. They realized that to inspire respect, One does not need to command the room with words or theatrics. Sometimes, the simplest acknowledgement of competence, confidence, and authority is enough. The fleet commander had demonstrated this perfectly. As the woman disappeared into the night, her figure becoming a silhouette against the moonlit base, those left behind were left with a mix of awe and inspiration. The admiral sat quietly, taking in the lessons he had learned in what was supposed to be a casual evening. He understood that this moment, brief, unplanned, and unexpected, would stay with him, reminding him of the true essence of leadership. It was not in the titles, the medals, or the battles fought, but in the quiet confidence, earned experience, and calm authority that could command respect without uttering a single word. By the time the bar emptied, the story of that evening had already begun to spread. Officers and sailors would retell it in their own words, each recounting carrying admiration and subtle inspiration. The impact of the fleet commander's presence that night was clear. Leadership is not just a position. It is a reflection of character, discipline, and earned respect. And sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the quietest moments. In the end, the fleet commander's departure left a lingering lesson in humility, authority, and the quiet power of presence. She had reminded everyone present that true leaders inspire naturally, that respect is earned, and that the impact of calm confidence can ripple far beyond the moment itself. That night, in a simple bar on base, she became more than an officer with a title. She became a symbol of true leadership, a story that would quietly inspire generations of service members to come.